And one of the first projects that committee has done is the UFL project you're going to hear part of is the next discussion. So I'll let Neil discuss that in much greater detail and much better than I can, because she's the one doing it. But you know, we'll hear what we're trying to do to solve the problem. This problem is not going to be fixed though in the next 3 months, 6 months, or something like that. Even if our project works like the way we think it will, it's still going to take time. All right, so we can't fix this tomorrow. So somebody can't say that, well, you lost your market, tough. You're just gonna have to find another one. It isn't gonna be that easy, and this isn't gonna be the solution. Just so as this discussion goes forward, we're all clear. Finally, I'd like to talk about a cool new tool we got for our members. It's a calculator. It figures out, if you plug in there what you recycle, say wood or something like that, 500 tons of wood, it'll tell you how many light bulbs that replaced, or the environmental value of whatever you have recycled. It'll be figured out for you in terms that a layman can understand. We haven't really announced it yet, but I think it's one of the coolest things we've done later, and I just thought I'd throw that in there at the very end. I believe that's all I have to say at the start of this thing, but I hope to be a very big contributor later on into this meeting. So I'll turn it back over to you, John, or you want to go straight to Neil?
Yeah, I'll take over from here, but thanks, Bill, for that perspective. I know you also talked about the 75% recycling, but also a lot of communities in Illinois have recycling ordinances, especially like the city of Chicago, that requires their builders require a certain percentage of recycling. So it's just not the state permitting issues, it's a lot of local ordinances too.
Good point. Good point. Thanks, John.
Yep. So, to introduce as Bill kind of led into, we have Neil Kalita from the University of Florida, who is a PhD student and doing research in C&D FINES and Biochar applications. So, Neil, thank you for participating today, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, John. Gloria, a quick question. Can you give me the permission to share my screen, please?
Yes. I am trying to here.
Okay, okay.
I want to, it's sharing my screen. We saw how we did this yesterday.
We appreciate everybody's patience. This is our second webinar, so we're still learning.
Yeah. What I've done in the past, Gloria, is when you get to the share screen, usually go to multiple participants.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I have to do. Then I'll let the smarter people than me run the thing.
Okay, you should be able to now, Neil.
Okay, thank you, Gloria.
Got it.
Thank you, thank you. So I'm a PhD student at the University of Florida, and I'm, as Bill said, I'm working on FINES and Biochar project currently. So I am going to talk about FINES very briefly and then talk more about the research we are doing to develop a product. So the research is done in collaboration with the Construction and Demolition Recycling Association. So the components we are dealing with when it comes to the C&D debris are FINES. Off of all the major components, we are dealing with FINES and biochar, which is derived from the waste wood. So when I say waste wood, the wood that we are talking about here varies from the dimensional lumber to engineered wood to treated wood. So the C&D FINES, they have a few major and a few minor components, but these components, The proportion of these components in the fines depend upon the nature of the waste stream or the materials they are recovered, the degree of processing, etc. And also depending on the size of the screen, which is used to screen the fines at the very beginning without crushing the materials, also determine the components that we get in any C&D fines. So these have various opportunities to be managed either at landfills as alternate daily cover or outside of landfills. So the various C&D fines that we have from recycling organizations in the country, over many years, our lab have done various studies, and one of the characterization study that was done at the University of Florida had separated the different components to figure out what were the proportions of different components that there were in C&D fines. So this was done to figure out what could be the potential markets, but obviously all the markets there are comes with its own set of issues such as odor, fire, or some kind of environmental risk or the other. So during this characterization study, it was also found that arsenic, lead, and BAP were some of the chemicals which created, or pollutants which created a concern due to the exposure, and sulfate, which is formed due to the presence of gypsum drywall in the fines, was a concern because of its odor, other than safety issues associated with sulfate. So it was found on the basis of literature that there were various opportunities to reduce the pollutant concentrations if we were willing to use C&D fines, reusing C&D fines basically, such as washing and blending. At our lab, we are currently trying to figure out what can be a good blend of fines and biochar, and we'll see in a short bit why. So first of all, the problem with gypsum drywall is that gypsum in presence of moisture content in landfills in anaerobic conditions converts into hydrogen sulfide, which is an odor issue, and it's a safety issue because at higher concentrations, it knocks off the sense of smell and can ultimately lead to death due to its poisoning. So how do we create a better landfill cover product? So it was found on the basis of literature that the biochar can actually behave like activated carbon. It reacts similarly to an activated carbon, activated charcoal, and it has a capacity to absorb hydrogen sulfide. So at the plus point of using a biochar is, there are two plus points actually. The first one is it's inexpensive in comparison to activated carbon, activated charcoal. And another benefit is you also get a market for the waste wood in the process of developing biochar from the wood. So the first thing we did was, this is again in collaboration with the CDRA, we conducted a proof of concept study to see if the concept that's out there actually works. And how we did it is we derived C&D fines and biochar samples from different places, different sources. And we actually did use more than 2 C&D fines, but the results I have over here is from just 2 C&D fines from 2 different facilities. So at the get-go of the experiment, we did a very small test where we had different glass bottles and we flushed the oxygen out of it. So it's similar to a landfill, excepting for without any waste. And what we did, we injected the glass bottles with 25 parts per million standard hydrogen sulfide gas. And then a few bottles had biochar added in them in different proportions. So the graph that you see on your extreme right shows that the biochar indeed actually absorbs the hydrogen sulfide, because the graph that the bar chart on the extreme left in the graph shows the bottle which doesn't contain any biochar at all. So to simulate a landfill in a laboratory condition, what we did is we did a few batch experiments where we had these 2000 milliliter glass bottles where we added C&D fines and biochar in different proportions, added water to it to represent the moisture in landfills. We flush the oxygen out of these bottles so it becomes anaerobic, just like a landfill is. And then we stored these bottles in the incubator. And over an 8-week period, we measured H2S using a Jerome meter of these bottles, of each of these bottles. So here I have the result from various weeks. For the first week, we see the control. When I say control, I mean these are the simulated landfills in glass bottles, which doesn't contain any biochar at all. And if we look at the graph, as we increase the amount of biochar that's added or mixed with the C&D fines, the amount of H2S suppressed is higher. And this is more evident as we go into the following weeks. Like these are the results from the second week, the third, and the fourth. And here I have a graph of another C&D fines, which was mixed with 2 different biochars, one at a time, but in different proportions. So the graph up top is actually the control. When I say control again, it's again the bottle which doesn't contain any biochar at all. So the amount of H2S generated over 8 weeks can be seen in this graph, and the graphs after the control, like below the control, actually is found to produce lesser H2S, which proves that H2S is indeed absorbed by biochars. And in fact, both the biochars were of different kinds, and they both helped in attenuating the hydrogen sulfide that was produced by the C&D fines. So currently, we are using this pilot study to figure out what could be a good recipe of C&D fines and biochar. And our idea is to use this eventually in a landfill as a test to see how much H2S can be controlled over time. With that, I conclude. And if there are any questions, please let us know. I'll try to answer as many questions as I can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Neil. Appreciate your presentation.
Sure.
And that's your contact information if people want to follow up, if their questions aren't answered, if they come up with something later on. Our next speaker will be Tom Hubbard of the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency. He's the manager of the Disposal Alternative Unit Permit Section in the Bureau of Land. And Tom's going to talk about the permitting of the C&D processing and recycling facilities, and if there's any, let's also talk briefly about what the legislative solution might be to this, in addition to the end market solution. So Tom, appreciate your presentation, and go ahead.
Thanks, John. I sent my slides to Gloria. Can she get them up?
Gloria?
Yeah,
I see him up there.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah. Well, I don't think she's. Can we go up to the first slide? I don't think she's on the first slide.
Okay, I see the first slide, so I think we're there.
Odd, it's not showing. It's showing like the third one on mine.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But as we're getting there, I'm Tom Hubbard. I'm the manager of the Disposal Alternatives Unit at the Illinois EPA. I've worked at the EPA for almost 21 years now, though I've been manager only for about a year and a half. But the Illinois is kind of an oddball state in that it actually has separate classifications for construction demolition debris. We have 2 classifications. And this is, I'm showing the C&D classification and use slide, which is like, I believe, the 3rd slide. I don't know if you can get it back
I
to
see
the first one.
CCDD classification on mine.
Yeah, it's, but we want, that's actually like the 3rd slide. But okay, I can work with it, I guess. But yeah, there's 2 classifications for C&D. We have what's called general C&D, which is basically anything from construction or demolition, excluding anything that happens to be hazardous, like asbestos or something like that. And then we have a subset of that called general C&D, or sorry, clean C&D, and it's defined to be just uncontaminated masonry material. Basically, it's concrete, rock, brick, or block, and asphalt pavement. Any soils generated with it that's uncontaminated. And CCDD is explicitly defined not to be a waste under certain circumstances. So as long as it meets the definition of CCD, and it's in the Act, the first slide defined it better, but I have a reference at the end of this slide. It's in section 3.160B, as in boy, of the Act, the Illinois Environmental Protection Act. And so it's not a waste, and it can be used with restrictions. Basically, you have to be below grade, outside the setback of any potable water well, and covered with soil or a structure. And that does not require any permitting or even notification of us, unless you're filling a mine, quarry, or other man-made excavation or resource. That requires what we call a CCD fill permit. And it's a very long, complicated term of that. It's basically politics. Then there's another subset that concrete, broken concrete can be used as riprap, as long as it doesn't have protruding rebar. Then there's no restriction on that. It doesn't have to be below grade or covered with soil. So that's just, and those are both explicitly granted in the Act. And well, here's, I guess my slides got out of order somehow. Okay, well, this was hoping would be the first slide. Like I said, the Act divides it. Okay, and there's okay. Let's go over this classification for a second here. I said it's classified into 2: clean construction demolition debris and general. I said, and they're both defined in the Act. It's 3.160A for general and 3.160B for clean construction demolition debris. Can we advance? And that's the title slide. Can we go to the next one? And in general, construction demolition debris is defined as a waste. It's a subset of municipal solid waste. And so therefore you have to either reuse, recycle, or landfill it. We do have a special section in the Act, 22.38, which allows recycling without requiring local siting approval, which is required for any other waste management activity, at least off-site waste management activity. And there are many requirements in there. It's a long section, but the one that I believe as John was talking about earlier said that it requires at least 75% of the general C&D has to be recycled. But the kind of good thing is that some of the landfill uses, up to 35% are considered as recycling. So that helps, but I know it is still a problem. And it does still require a permit from the agency. You have to go through the application process and get a permit. But 2038 says you do not need local siting if you exclusively take general C&D. You can also just have a regular transfer station and just recycle whatever percentage you want, but then you have to get local siting. Can I get the next slide, please? As was mentioned earlier, you could use general C&D as alternate daily cover, and I believe that's the most common use if it's not being recycled. There's a few other possibilities that it can be used as. One would be in a site remediation project like a brownfield, where they're trying to clean up a contaminated site. And that is based on the TACO, the Tiered Approach to Corrective Action regulations. It's 742 of the Illinois Administrative Code, if you're interested. That is site-specific, so basically they look at the particular geography and geology of the site and determine what the risk is to human health and environment for that particular contaminant. So, depending on the situations, it's possible it might be used there. And there's also a provision in 22.58 of the Act that allows us to make a beneficial use determination, where we can say that we're allowing you to use a waste to replace a raw material or a product. The most common use of that in Illinois is for asphalt shingles. Basically, they get a bud, so they can take asphalt shingles, grind them, and then they give them back to a asphalt plant manufacturer, and they mix it in to replace some of the virgin asphalt. But there's no, well, there's a few limitations. Anything that's, if it's non-hazardous, it's not a coal combustion ash or coal combustion byproduct, not a sludge, and not a used oil, or not a potentially infectious medical waste, then you can apply, and we look at it on a case-by-case basis. And you might be able to get a use for it that way, but you have to show that you're replacing a raw material or a product, and it's not just basic disposal. Okay, next slide, please. Yep, I thought I had. Well, I guess the C&D clean C&D was out before, but that's my contact information if you have questions. And I guess we can. Are we waiting for everyone to do before we answer any questions?
Yeah, we'll wait for Ron to finish, and then we'll
Okay.
do the chat box, and I have my own set of questions too. Hopefully it'll get things rolling. Okay. Thanks, Tom. Our next speaker is Ron Taslar of Taz C&D Recycling here in Northeast Illinois. And he's going to talk about the operator's experience, and also touch on a group of individuals that are looking towards how to find solutions to the issue about the recycling percentage and the lack of landfills that will take this material as a beneficial use. So Ron, thank you for participating, and go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, John. And thanks to all of you who are a part of this today. It's really great to see the turnout and the interest in what's going on here. So yeah, my name's Ron, as John said, and we own and operate 3 different C&D recycling facilities throughout Illinois. We have one in McCook, one in Aurora, and then most recently we acquired a facility in Palatine called MBL Recycling. I'm sure most of you are familiar with that. The way that we kind of, it's kind of unique how we operate. We have one in Aurora that we just opened last June in 2019. So we're just over a year in on that one, and that is currently, we have 3 different ways that we describe ours just in-house. Stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. Stage 1 being a ground sort, stage 2 being a little bit more of a mature site where you have a screen and a single line system, and then a stage 3 where we have a dual line system with a destoner, lights, heavy separator, and all that good stuff. So Aurora is a stage 1 facility where we're ground sorting. We do have a concrete crushing operation there as well. And then McCook is our stage 2 facility where we're running our material through a general kinematic screen, and then a magnet pulling out the metal in the fines, and the fines is a 4-inch cut there. And I apologize if you guys don't know all the lingo on this, but I'm just going to pretend that you do. So yeah, so and then in Palatine, we have a 2-line system with, it's a really state-of-the-art facility. It's got an electric excavator feeding the plant, which is really cool. It's done very, very well. The former owner, Rob Lenzini, is a equipment guru, and so the future plans for us is to make all of our facilities a stage 3 facility in McCook and in Aurora. Last year I bought a bunch of general kinematics equipment that was from a facility in Nashville that got moved out because the town was growing so much. So we ended up moving that to Aurora, and that's going to be a 2-line system as well. So yeah, that's a little bit of the background on who we are and what we do. We also run roll-off trucks throughout Chicagoland. So what Bill said in the beginning is probably the most challenging thing for us is the end markets. These end markets are constantly changing for us, and we are constantly developing new outlets and trying to develop new outlets for end markets. So for example, this year with coronavirus, everyone was at home. Well, what were they doing? They were fixing up their house. They were trying to stay busy. So it was a huge mulch season for us. A few years back, the Biochar facility, or the cogen facility up in Cassville, Wisconsin, where most of Chicago's wood went, shut down abruptly. So there was a huge influx of wood in the market. It was a really difficult item that we had to deal with. But being entrepreneurs and businessmen with a lot of money on the line, and doing our best, very best to recycle as much as we could, you come up with solutions. So a lot of mulch was created. And this year, from all the people that I've talked to, wood was a very hard market for wood. You could not find wood, and people were begging. People were starting to pay for it. You know, it was, it's very interesting. So end markets are huge. Well, in March, February, we took over the MBL site here and started talking with landfills about contracts. And as of April 1st, the landfills all told us that, yeah, we're no longer taking fines as they are. We're dealing with odor issues, and this cell is not contaminated yet, and the cost to mitigate the odors is so high that it's not worth it for us. So we're not going to take them anymore from you. What we'll do, though, if you want to mix them in with the garbage, we'll take them that way. So I don't know how that makes any sense, but they're still going to the landfill if you mix them in with the garbage. We just couldn't count it as a recycling opportunity. So we ended up getting a contract that allows us with certain conditions where we have to do our own testing. The landfill does their testing, and we have to stay below a 5% gypsum content, and which we've been able to do. So we ask, how do we do that, right? You know, when a house gets demolished in Cook County, and by the Cook County ordinance, they're required to do 75% recycling. They have to come to one of our facilities. And there's, at my best guess, there's 18 sites or 19 sites throughout the Chicagoland area, and there's one downstate in Bloomington, I believe, or Bloomington, yeah. All these counties, like Lake County, Chicago requires 50%. Lake County requires 75%, and Cook County requires 75% of demo. Well, where are they going to go if we can't get rid of this stuff at 75%? We can't even meet those requirements. So it's something that we're working on very diligently to try and keep drywall out. If we see a load of drywall come into the facility, get tipped on the floor, that immediately gets pushed aside, and either we'll hand sort that for anything that's recyclable in it, or if it's good and clean drywall, there are some folks that will take drywall for land application. They'll pelletize it and use it for a lime agricultural usage. Yeah, it's a major challenge for us. We have a lot of money invested in these sites. We're continuing to invest money. We pay a lot of money in taxes every year. We employ over 60 employees on just the lines and the yards alone. And that's just the tip of the iceberg for what's going on here in Chicago. There's a lot of other large players in the market who are dealing with the same things. And yeah. So I don't know what the plan is going forward, but something has got to change. And based on our numbers that we've done this year, we are, if we look at just the numbers, what we've diverted from the landfill, it's around 52%. And that's not including fines. Fines is around 21% of what, and that's collectively over the 3 sites. So the numbers, you know, I could go into each one, but that's not important. But so we're very close to our 75% right now, but it's based on a 12-month rolling average. And we struggle every year to meet it. We have to work very hard at finding new ways to divert material from the landfill. And at the end of the day, that's what these sites do. They divert material from the landfill. So my main concern, obviously, is my business, first of all. If the landfills no longer accept or refuse to take fines, we're no longer in business. I'm no longer going to be paying taxes. I'm no longer going to be employing, tens and tens of, 50 plus people. And that goes throughout the market in Chicago. So the solutions are pretty limited. If we're hearing this biochar thing, which is unbelievable, if that works, and we can get something going with that, that would be just fantastic. But like Bill said, this isn't a month, 2 month, 3 month, it's potentially years down the road. Our options are limited. So we've assembled a task force at the IRA, or through the IRA. We've put together some stakeholders in the state here, some fellow recyclers. The EPA has been sitting on it, and some county folks. And, we've kind of determined that 75% is not a realistic number for a C&D site. Certainly not if we can't count our fines toward that 75%. So we've had one phone call, one Zoom meeting in regards to that. And we plan to have at least 2 more and just kind of come up with a plan, which we don't have a very good one at this point, but the conversation has been started. So if I'm missing anything, Bill, you can just unmute yourself and chime right in. But that's about all I have.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Appreciate your perspective, and I think you kind of show what the situation is, that it needs immediate attention, or there'd be consequences. So I'm going to go to the questions here. Hopefully all 4 of our panelists are unmuted. And the first question that we have was more directed to Tom Hubbard. Maybe you can see that, Tom, but I'll read it. It says, when and how will material used at a landfill be considered, quote, recycling, when 2238C states that it is not recycled general C&D when processed for use in the landfill?
Well, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, 28A3 says that you can, that for general construction debris that's processed for use at the landfill, except it shall not exceed 35%. So 75% recycling requirement, up to 35% of it can be materials that is processed for use as a landfill, which is generally an alternate daily cover. They might have some other use like fill or something, but that's what the vast majority of it does. And I was also going to say that 75%, it is in the Act. I mean, it's the Illinois Environmental Protection Act, which is public law. So, they modify the Act practically every year, much to our dismay. But so it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility that you could get it changed to reduce it. But that's political, not engineering. So.
Okay. I guess there's a couple of follow-up questions to that. One, and I don't know if the agency has a personal, but maybe some of the others can opinion on this, but some of the others can chime in. Is 75% a reasonable recycling rate, or is their interest to reduce the percentage, and then maybe talk about what would be the process to go about to reduce that percentage.
Well, as I said, it's the Illinois, it's in the Illinois Environmental Protection Act. So to change that, they would have to. It's a public law, so the General Assembly would have to modify the act. And I said they do that practically every year for various things. You know, it's a big law, so they're always changing it. But it's basically a political compromise, as you know, a lot of things in the act are. And
You know,
you can, you know, it's possible that if you can get enough political support, you can get it changed. I don't actually work in the field, so I don't know. You know, I've heard, you know, a lot of concern that 75 is too high, but I don't know what it should be. I don't really have a good number for that.
I was gonna say, Ron or Bill, do you have a percentage that other states use, or one that you feel would be more of a compromise solution to this?
Bill, I'd like to hear what other states are doing.
Yeah, and I think we rely on, yeah, it's all over the map as far, you know, some states do require to get a full solid waste permit for the recycling facilities. Some, like California, have deterred permitting. And if you recycle 50%, you're good, as well as if you keep under certain tonnages. And there's a lot of other stuff that I'm sure IEPA does too, as far as speculative accumulation and all that kind of stuff. So it really is all over the map. In our website, in the members only section, and something else that Neil is working on, we have a 50-state profile of all the C&D regulations from across the country, from every state. She's working on updating that right now. And they have those kind of percentages in there if you want to dig in and really look at what's out there. But it's all, it really is kind of all over the map. 75 is kind of high, though. From what I know of being out there, as far as, you know, even avoiding an SWP. What do you think, Ronnie? You're the one who's got to make it without doing the fines anymore. And I'd like to hear from some of the other recyclers on the call too. Yeah,
I would too. So 75% is a struggle. We've been able to achieve that. But like I said, when you do a ground sort, or maybe I didn't mention this, but a ground sort is almost impossible unless you're only taking wood or you know, site sourced or site separated materials, where, you know, you're putting a box out and people only put wood in there. They only put concrete. They only put bricks, whatever the case may be. But without taking fines out of the mix, that our highest facility is 26%. That's year to date, 26%. Our lowest is, well, Aurora, we don't even pull fines. So, yeah, I would say without fines in the mix, 55 to 50% is our max recycling rate.
I would agree with that on a national basis too. It is. But again, to go back to an earlier question too, the C&D, you know, fines being used as an alternative daily cover, is that landfilling. You know, it is replacing, as I mentioned earlier, it is replacing a virgin material. It is saving on dirt. So I recognize what the regulations say, but sometimes common sense has to come into play here too. And it is a product.
Okay. Well, that kind of segues into some of the other questions. For Neil, how stable is the sulfur in the biochar, and does the biochar just absorb the H2S, and does it chemically alter it? And well, could it possibly be released back over time? I'm sure the landfills would be concerned about that.
Right. So the maximum amount of time we studied this in our simulated glass bottles was just 8 weeks. So for 8 weeks, for that period, the sulfur seemed to be stable because like it was, the graphs went down, but there is a concern with the pH that might go up. But the good thing with the pH that goes up in these bottles is that, so what happens during the reaction is there is a bacteria, the sulfate reducing bacteria reduces the sulfate into sulfide. So what happens when the pH goes up, the growth of the bacteria goes down. So the bacteria cannot survive in too much of a basic environment. So those reactions come about when the carbon dioxide that's there in the bottles get converted into CaCO3, etc. So we haven't studied this beyond an 8-week period, to be very honest. But if I were to answer, so H2S adsorbs. I'm pretty sure there is a chemical reaction as well, but we haven't studied it into that much depth. I can go back to my research group and ask if somebody else did it in my group before me coming here. I can definitely get back to that question.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead.
I'd just like to chime in and say that in general, it depends. Obviously, municipal solid waste varies greatly, but on average, it's very well buffered and generally has a fairly neutral pH.
Okay. For another question for you, Neil,
Yeah.
what are the differences in the two biochars you used for your study, and how and from what feedstock these biochars were produced? How much biochar was mixed with C&D fines?
Okay, so the difference between the two biochar, they were both the biochars that we used for the study, the results that I presented, they were all derived from A wood, both of them. And how much was mixed? So the amount of fines that we used for the study was 600 grams. And as for the biochar, each of them was used in different percentages of 0% of the fines, 20%, 40%, and the highest amount we used was 60%. So it's 360 grams. So 60% of 600 grams.
Okay. We had a question for, I guess, probably be Tom. Does EPA have a plan for dealing with facilities that don't meet the 75%? I don't know if you're in a position to talk about what's the outcome or future for these guys that don't meet that.
No, we don't have anything official. Typically, for any permitted facility, if they are not in compliance with one of the terms of their permit, we issue what's called a violation notice saying you're not complying with the act or your permit, and then we work towards trying to get a compliance commitment agreement where they'll get back into compliance. But that's on a case-by-case basis. We don't have an overall plan.
Right. So I get that if people want to reduce the percentage, the impetus will then probably come from the industry and not from within the agency. Is that kind of what you said, you indicated?
Well, yeah, it'd have to be political. So typically we don't, for most, this is about my pay grade, but in most cases we don't get really involved in the, changing the act, unless it's like a regulatory change from the US EPA, we're passing through something like that. But they'll typically ask us when they try to change, what of our opinion, and we'll either say we support, neutral, or don't support. And I said it'd be above my pay grade to decide where we would be on that grade, so I can't really say.
Okay. All right, and then we have another question to Neil. What is the mechanism through which H2S release has been prevented by using biochar?
So the H2S, it actually adsorbs to the surface of the biochar particles. That's how, so it's adsorbed, basically. Adsorption's the thing.
So it doesn't prevent the release, it just absorbs it. So once it is
absorbs. Yeah, so it's not released into the headspace gas.
Yeah, basically you can consider the biochar as low quality activated carbon.
And it's inexpensive in comparison to the activated charcoal as well. So.
Right. It may be for the last person who commented, for people that aren't familiar with biochar, maybe just quick explain what biochar is and how it's produced.
Neil?
Oh yeah, sorry, okay. So what happens is biochar is produced, like I have a slide over here, which briefly kind of goes over it. So what happens is it's produced by a pyrolysis process, which is a limited, oxygen limited conditions, and high temperature is used to convert the waste wood into biochar. Does it make sense?
Yes.
Briefly.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's similar to making charcoal.
Yeah.
Okay. In just my own question, follow up on that. Is the recycled wood that comes out of these C&D facilities, could that be a potential feedstock for biochar?
Yeah. So like the biochar that we had used before, like even the biochar that we are using now, it's derived from waste wood, essentially. The wood that's coming off of construction and demolition debris.
Okay.
And Neil, add in there, you know, we're doing bee wood and all that kind of stuff
We
now.
are doing bee wood as well, yeah. Bee wood,
Biochar made from bee wood, just to make, just a real life C&D stuff.
yeah.
Okay. All right. The other question, and I guess probably Ron, maybe you can address this on what the impact would be, is isn't the 75% requirement only needed to be exempt from citing as a regional pollution control facility and not permitting by the agency? And that goes to the need to go through the citing process and how onerous that might be for people that haven't had to do that in the past. Ron, you want to comment on that, you know, as an operator?
You're breaking up a little bit. Repeat that question.
Okay, there's a comment about the 75% requirement only needed to be the exempt from citing as a regional pollution control facility, but you could still, with that, you get a permit from the agency. But how onerous would that be for you to have to go through that citing process at your 3 facilities?
So the question would be if we wanted to make all of our facilities an MSW site?
Yeah, right, because it'd say, well, okay, we don't care about the 75%, we'll just become a transfer station then.
Yeah, well, we don't do garbage, first of all, so it's not something we're interested in. But if it meant our livelihoods were on the line, I suppose we'd have to look into it, and then we'd have to look at each municipality has a fee, which some don't even, I mean, they make it so expensive that it's not worth it. And then it has to go before the community and city council to be approved. And most people don't want garbage in their town. And I don't know a whole lot about that. So all I know is that it's a major hurdle.
Okay.
Yeah, it is a major hurdle, and actually it basically depends on the town. Some towns are, especially around the greater Chicago area, are very anti new waste management. And like I said, so basically make it almost impossible. But other towns, it's not that big a deal, but still a pain in the butt. But I was just going to say that if you don't want to use the 2238 exemption, you have to accept something other than general C&D. It can be 99% general C&D, but it says the Act actually says facilities exclusively accepting general C&D for blah, blah, blah. So if you don't accept anything other than general C&D, you fall under that even if you do get local citing. So I was just going to say you'd have to take a little bit of something else.
Okay. Oh. I think there was a question about the biochar and how viable is it from an economic standpoint to put 60% of biochar in with your fine material?
Right, so obviously like higher the amount of biochar results in higher absorption, but we do understand there is a economic feasibility we have to keep in mind when we do these experiments so that, you know, it's practically usable in field. So right now what we are trying to do is we are trying to use 15 and 30% instead of going 60%. So we're trying to see how much H2S is attenuated if we use lesser biochar. So we're still studying that.
One of the other points that we were going to do with the study at, you know, even at 60%, there's a lot of guys out there throughout the country have a lot of wood and nowhere else to go with it. So maybe 60% looks really good to them.
Okay.
Thanks, Bill.
How much can they produce in a day? How much biochar can be produced in a day?
It depends on which system you go with. There's upflow and downflow. The Aries facility in New Jersey, I don't remember, but hundreds of tons a day, and they sell it for a lot of money. But they have different end markets for it. The simple upflow machine like the ROI, I don't think it does more than 25 tons a day. And Terry Ward might know better than I do how many tons a day it does, but it's not that big of a, I mean, it's not as much of a machine, but it doesn't cost as much either. The Aries system costs $13 million. So it depends on what kind of system you get and which way you go. And getting permitted, of course, is kind of important too. And, I'm not going to put Tom on the spot and say, hey, what do your air people say? But, I don't think that we'll have a problem getting them permitted.
How much does that machine cost?
How much? What?
Yeah. How much does that machine cost, did you say?
The ROI, you'd have to ask Anders. Tiger Cat owns it now.
Yeah, just also, that biochar has a lot of other uses in the waste industry. I know a lot of composters are starting to use it to avoid odors in some of their compost piles. There's a question here, maybe it's probably for Tom. Are there known examples in Illinois where C&D fines are being used or have received a BUD for purposes other than alternate daily cover?
I don't believe so. The vast majority of our buds are for the asphalt shingle recycling. We've had a few other ones, one for like reusing paint and let's see, I'm trying to bring up my bud database here. That's why I'm pausing. And of course it's taking forever. Let's see. We've had dredge materials, used tires, because the vast majority of them are shingles. Let's see, more paint, more used tires. Had a cement board, which is similar. Crushed off-spec ceramics, more cement board. Yeah, it looks like we have not received any for C&D fines.
All right. I'm looking at the chat box. I don't see any more questions in the chat box. I was going to ask our panelists if anybody had any final comments about what was discussed today and what you think our way forward is here. Maybe Bill, I'll start with you.
Thanks, John. I think that it was very good discussion, and and I think that Ronnie laid it out as to how our association and its members will feel because Ron is a member about how we're going to fix this problem. It will be, if there is trying to be a legislative fix, I am very concerned that there'll be a lot of opposition to it. Some of them listening in on this call, so I don't know if that's the way we're going to be going. Or something like that. But I don't have another solution outside of that at the current time. So it's going to be interesting to see how it proceeds, and if the C&D Recycling, at least among most of the players out there, continues, and how EPA decides to play this and all that kind of stuff. I will say that we have seen C&D fines used out throughout the country safely without any H2S generation. It kind of depends on how the landfill handles the material, and you have to use like 6-inch dirt once in a while to make sure that it works. I mean, I'm not a landfill expert. I defer to those guys, but it is going to be, it can be done without H2S generation, even without doing all the fancy stuff to it.
Okay. Neil, do you have any final comments?
No, I do not.
Okay. Tom, did you want to add anything from the presentation, comments and questions?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head, other than, the biochar process might need a permit from the Bureau of Air. It depends on how much emissions it has, and I'm not qualified to say exactly, whether it would or not.
Okay.
It does.
There is a Forest Service Research Institute, and there is a Biochar Institute that if people want more information on it, you can probably Google that and find out more. And then Ron, any parting comments?
I just want to thank you all for being a part of it. It was really great. It's something that myself and my team has been working on. A lot of conversations, a lot of discussion over what to do. I can tell you right now, we're not going to give up, and we'll find out a solution to the problem. Want to thank General Kinematics for sponsoring again, and I know Dick's on the call here. Thanks, Dick. And we have I just want to remind you, and I'm sorry if I'm taking away your talking points, John, but we have a annual meeting coming up, and I think we're going to be doing it via Zoom. It's so fun. So that's coming up in September, I believe, but I just want to remind you all and thank you for your support of the IRA, and just keep your eye on what's going on with this thing, with the C&D fines. It's so important. There's a lot at stake here. If we lose these fines, and we're all, these 20-some sites throughout Chicagoland are not able to recycle, you're talking about a lot of material going to the landfill and a lot of jobs lost, a lot of tax dollars not being spent, a lot of equipment not being purchased. It's a huge economic boost for this community. So thank you all.
Yeah, I think you covered what I was going to talk about, our upcoming association event. In recap, I just wanted to thank all our panelists, thank everybody for participating, thank our sponsor, General Kinematics, and stress to everybody in these days, we rely on membership now solely. We don't have a revenue source from these webinars. We like to keep them free, but that depends on how many people join the organization to keep us viable and seek solutions to problems that recycling presents itself in Illinois, and today was a perfect example of that. So that concludes the webinar, and again, I thank everybody for participating. And the satisfaction survey will be sent, so please fill that out. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.